Alright everybody, welcome back. This is the FRC Foamies Alpha Jet MK2. This is the second version of theirs. They have an MK1 which has got a single vertical stabilizer. This one's got a double vertical stabilizer. It was a pretty simple build. It's the first time I've ever built one where you put everything on the deck first and then you put all the tops on. It was really easy to get everything in there and get it all set up. I was just curious when I put it together, these vertical fins right here, I'm trying to get a good camera picture of it. See them coming down at an angle there. That was the hardest part to get and make sure I had clearance for the servos. If you look from the inside, you could see back there, maybe, the control rod sits right up against the back and runs right along. There's a good picture of it right there. Runs right along the foam that runs down right here. So that was a little bit of an interesting thing. I chose to go with 2 rudder servos. I've seen it before built with a single one in the back, but I went with 2. It's got 2 5 grams running the usual. The Turnigy 2826-6 2200 kV motor, your standard park jet motor. It's got a 7x3/8 slow fly prop on it. The electronics on the inside. Right now I've got an 1800 Turnigy in it for the battery, a 40C plush ESC, and a Lemon RC receiver. And so talk about the build real quick. It was pretty easy build, pretty straightforward. It was interesting to build something. You see the flat plate there on for the lower wing plate. I wanted to build it flat all the way across. Maybe next time, like I've read in some of the forums, as you can see, I ran the carbon fiber rod pretty much all the way to the end of the wingtip. There's a second one in the back about the same distance. I probably would run it only about halfway through, maybe an inch or 2 past this vertical support right here, and then build a little bit of dihedral into the wing. It might make it fly a little bit smoother. I haven't flown it yet, so we'll see. That's just a thought. And another thought would be this wing plate. Build the wing plate as a solid piece, scorn fold, and that way you can just lay it on top. And I would do keys, kind of like you do for the bottom here, for the structure. Do a key into the top and a key into the bottom for this support. And that way, one, make it a lot easier to paint before you put it on, so you don't have to destroy everything. And 2, you could put the supports on, get everything set up, and then just lay the top on it. The only thing that would make that a little interesting is putting these vertical stabilizers in, sliding them in through the back. Might be a little difficult with that, but not a big deal. Overall, the build went really well. I did use some new techniques with the build on this. I did the drywall tape for the control surfaces back here, and I used the Blenderm tape for the rudders. I use Blenderm tape almost all the time, so I want to try something a little different. The only thing I regret about this is I used epoxy. So it's a pretty rigid joint. It's not going to go anywhere, obviously, but it makes the servos work a lot harder. So maybe next time I'll do like everybody else and use the foam tack, but I try to use it sparingly. I have plenty of epoxy and the foam tack's a little harder to come by. So on the sides, I decided to give the foam tack a try, use the fiberglass tape with foam tack. It worked out pretty well. One of the other changes I might do with these vertical stabilizers is I'm not exactly sure how I would support this. As you can see, there's a lot of flex in there. And that's not necessarily good, but it's not really bad either. The control surface itself is pretty stiff, so I wouldn't have a problem with that. And another change I would probably do, or will probably do, would be this upper wing plate. It's pretty flexible. Remember, I'm using Dollar Tree foam here, so it's not the most structurally sound stuff. So maybe maybe using the fiberglass tape and the, well, you could use hot glue, you could use epoxy or foam tack, whatever. Maybe on this leading edge here. It's held together pretty well, but once you cut out the top here, you kind of lose some of that strength in there. But I did build the entire thing. out of foam tack glue, trying to try that out and see what it was like. The couple issues with the build I had, as you can see underneath, there's some light in there you can see sticking through, and that's basically because I went from a 6mm plan to a 4mm plan. And going from a 4mm plan to a 6mm plan, there's a lot of little changes you got to make. All the different slots and everything that's sized in here, like the grooves for the vertical stabilizers, you got to change and just kind of make happen. Another thing I would do would be a score and fold right here in this spot. I know it would cut the foam and make it a little bit more flexible, but at the same time I wouldn't have the foam itself bent over so much. And it definitely looks better bent over, but there's a lot of stress right here in the foam right now, so probably the first time I land it's going to stress fracture right across the top. I also put in the dual bulkhead for the front brace for the battery compartment. That's in the RC Powers forum for the ALFA Jet MK2. The plan's there. I don't remember who was that did it, but thank you, because my battery fits in there perfectly. The only thing I had to do was modify the wing plate to accept it, because typically, I'll flip it over here for you, typically the wing plate only has one slot right here in the middle and one slot back here. It wasn't hard to transfer. I just drew a straight line across both sides and made it happen. Just a little bit of some, it's not even math, just measuring. And you can see I did the carbon fiber effect on the bottom here. I've got 2 carbon rods for strength along the wing plate. I used epoxy for the motor mount, which was super easy to build. I always had a question throughout the build was, what is this little piece right here? I have no idea until I finally went back and looked at the pictures, and I was like, oh look, it's for the hatch. So that's pretty much the electronics. The overall weight is 359 grams as of right now, which is 12 5/8 ounces. So super light. That's without a battery, of course. Alright, for control surfaces, I went with just a Elevon setup and rudders. Nothing special with the Elevon and the rudders, it's just standard Elevon and standard rudder setup. I don't have any super mixing in there. The only thing I have is dual rates. So to start with, you got 15 degrees up and down for the elevator, and you go to high rates, and it's 30 degrees. I'm sure it's going to be way too much, but we'll figure that out after the first flight. And for the aileron control with the Elevons, right now it's set at low rates, which is 15 degrees, and then high rates, which goes up to 30 degrees. And that's just on a simple switch on the radio. I haven't put in any flaps, I haven't put in any exponentials, I didn't do anything with differentials in the servos. And for the rudder, you can see it's got 15 degrees both directions. Nothing super special there. It's not set up for anything crazy. Eventually I want to get it so when I pull back on the elevator, the rudders will come in together. I don't know how to mix that on my radio just yet, but we'll get there. And that's about the end of it. I'm about to go fly it for the first time. We've had terrible wind and weather for the last 4 days out here in the Pacific Northwest, but it has cleared up somewhat. Let's go flying.